I'm excited to be here today to share with you the state of our city. We had a successful State of the City address a couple of months ago where I described the city as strong and getting stronger. Nothing has changed. In fact, since then, we've gotten stronger. We are getting great reviews as recently as yesterday from admirals and generals that conducted and partnered with us on Fleet Week. They said they'd never been to a city that was more friendly and resourceful. But it's not just yesterday with the admirals and generals, but national publications are printing out that we're leading the nation in manufacturing jobs, that we're second only to Seattle in economic development, and also mentioning that Seattle completely closed down during COVID, so they're building back. So I could go on the recognition we're getting. Certainly Houstonians feel our energy and the direction we're going and really want us to continue to conduct city business. But on the greatness and the improvements we're making, we can't do it alone. How many times have we talked about collaboration? It's the key. It's how we play catch up. It's how we address neglect. All the different issues that we hear about when citizens come before us. The point is, I want to give credit where credit's due. We couldn't do it without collaboration with our county partners. It's never been stronger between the city and the county. The county commissioners have shared resources, taken over management of some city parks, helping us with the homeless, road repairs. The county collaborating with us is making a huge difference, and I think each and every one of them. But they come with conditions. I don't always agree with what their requests are. Commissioner Garcia and I couldn't agree how the Parks Department, the City Parks Department, would collaborate and share soccer fields with his recreational department. And they insist, and they're strong leaders. If we're going to partner and collaborate, this is what I expect. As Commissioner Briones and I have agreed on what the signage would look like, something not insignificant, quite frankly, but what type of crosswalk will we have in areas where we both represent the same people. Thank you to the county for their collaboration. I understand the compromises that go with collaboration and the sharing of funds. We would not be the great city we are and moving forward without funding from Harris County. The state requires that you follow their riders and their grant language. Having sat on state finance for years, very little budget items go forward without strings attached, conditions, and signed agreements. I can give you examples where they also, in the past, withheld money from Houston. Harvey recovery funding, because Land Commissioner Bush insisted on certain provisions and accountability and follow-up. They withdrew the Harvey recovery funding. Just last session, the state funded, with special items, $267 million. Let me say it again. In the budget, special items for Houston was $267 million. $215 million for water treatment, plant repairs, $17 million from parks, infrastructure, roads, $20 million, and public safety, $15 million. Some large items like the water treatment was $100 million. Then the last week of the session, I got a hold of the chairman of finance from Houston, Chair Husband, and said, Joan, we got to have some police cars. It is unheard of for Austin to fund municipal police cars. So she put $10 million in the budget for 200 police cars with directions and guarantees that that's what it will be used for. We would not be the strong city going forward without our partnership with strings attached from the city of Houston and now the federal government. The Undersecretary of HUD was in my office yesterday. They want to help us with affordable housing. They want to help us with the homeless. We have been encouraged to go for grant money in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and that will occur with strings attached. And we argued about how we're going to use the money, but they control the funding. And I cannot thank my team enough and members around this horseshoe for understanding that we're fixing Houston. The polls show that people are pleased, and I don't govern by polls, but people feel it, they see it. The pavement of 1,000 miles of city streets this year, partly with state and county funding. Public safety, our fire and police cadet classes have never been larger. We've sworn in 800 police cadets in the last 2 years. Large numbers of Houston fire. Total of 2,400 police officers now. Largest ever, 5,400 police officers, largest ever. And it's required to have a safe city overtime. Pop-up protests have to be secured. Synagogue school this morning got a credible gun scare. It involves HPD having the numbers and resources that they need. Home repairs, recovery funding for generators. I could go on and on. That's the system which exists where no level of government does things alone. Our park funding, our public safety, infrastructure, jobs. Organized labor's never understood or appreciated the jobs that we're creating as much as they do now. From the state, we got $2 billion for the George Brown expansion. $2 billion. People are signing up for conventions for years to come. Last week, we got $100 million from the state to completely redo Toyota Stadium. All have conditions. All are making a difference. So today we have to decide, do we want to remain strong or not? And I'm here to submit to the public, my colleagues, I know the direction that we're going to go. We're going to remain strong and deal with a very serious issue, one that I said over a year ago that I was sorry that we even had to deal with it. But we've been consistent. We followed the law. We protected residents' Fourth Amendment rights, and we protected the city funding. I was told by some of the proponents that the state just won't challenge you. Councilman Salinas, I begged you in my office to please consider the worst-case scenario, which is before us today. In all due respect, you said, the governor won't do that, and I've referenced HISD. That's what people said before the state moved in on HISD. I know Abbott. I've voted against him more than any living person. And quite frankly, y'all played right into his hands.
You voted for it. So.
I understand, and let's talk about why I did. It's, again, the legislative process. The first proposed A was absolutely on its face in violation of Senate Bill 4, which I voted against. The revision was much better, and that's the legislative process. I didn't get everything I wanted in the revision, and it certainly got the attention of the authorities in Austin, particularly when some of the proponents leave out of here and say it's ticket and release. That triggered where we are today. And that was never the discussion around this horseshoe, and it was never in consideration as we did a revised version. But it got their attention. I was told, well, Austin and Dallas are being left alone. No more. Thanks to our discussion, they're in discussion today with Austin, and you'll be seeing them adopt the language that I'm proposing today, that follows the law, reinforces the Fourth Amendment, and protects our city funding. It's an interesting comparison. We have in jeopardy, in fact, not jeopardy, we lost it last Wednesday, $114 million for public safety. Austin has the potential of losing $2.5 million, which again points to the collaboration between this administration in Houston and the state of Texas. Thank God that we can pick up the phone and talk to the governor's office and say, let's keep talking, because that has not been the model in Houston and Austin for years. Let's keep talking. We have no alternative but to keep talking to preserve Houston's finances. We've already spent some of the money getting prepared for FIFA and for police overtime and the police cars. Austin is asking for the return of those funds, and we'll get no additional funding from this grant. Some would say, let's go to court. Any objective lawyer knows that if you got a favorable ruling in Harris County, the state Supreme Court would overrule it the same day. They're not going to do a restraining order on the governor of Texas or the Fifth Circuit if you follow their rulings. So that's not an alternative, because time is costing us dollars. It's costing us public safety. It's costing us our reputation across this state and this nation. I am still getting calls from major city mayors. Whitmire, how'd you do it? How'd you maintain the calm when our national news was showing the tragedies of Minneapolis, LA, Chicago, New Orleans, Memphis? Of course, that created fright, anxiety in all of us. I did it, as I explained to large city mayors, by not politicizing it, staying off the administration's radar. We have had a success, and I understand the heartache. I have personal relationships with undocumented families, close relationships. I'm in the community. I listen to the witnesses. And it's painful for me to sit here and have to spend 3 hours being misrepresented, because I have the credentials to talk about this issue, having spent 50 years in Austin and watched the demographic changes of our state. Yes, this is an emotional discussion, but you should have been in the legislature in '74 when I was a freshman state rep and bilingual education was introduced in the legislature. Think about it. '74, it was a different world. Bilingual education, we take things for granted now that were emotional battlefields. Then the farm workers. Most of y'all don't know I spent 5 years of my childhood 30 miles from Waco in a very rural setting. Came back to Houston to finish high school. I understand the hardships of farm workers. I found out that they were spraying the fields in the valley with chemicals, pesticides, and the farm workers would go in there immediately and take the chemicals and poisons back home, and they'd pick up their children. John Whitmire, stopped that. Look at the prison reforms in the 80s. Look at them in the 90s when I became the chair. I did my very, very best to allow undocumented prisoners for low-level nonviolent offenses to go back to Mexico and their country of origin. To this day, I'm disappointed that I could not pass that because they were being used. Low-level nonviolent undocumented prisoners were being used to run the prisons. Could never prove it. But experience and common sense can lead the way. We still have way too many undocumented locked up, running over 100 prisons because they're some of the best workers, just like in the free world. Then the DREAM Act. You think that wasn't controversial, to let undocumented students that have been here their entire life get in-state tuition? I not only voted for it, I protected it. Rick Noriega, a local state rep, came up with that concept and idea. Voted against Senate Bill 4, long before I ever thought we'd be having this discussion. So I have the credentials to understand, represent, and defend the undocumented community. The key was not politicizing it. Oh, you can call ICE the F word or whatever you want. They just send more resources here. We have been successful defending families across Houston because ICE had very limited resources here. We saw some violations by some officers. We're not perfect. So the chief and I had a press conference to roll out a more accountable system. A sergeant has to be there. You won't transport anybody. It was working. In the month of March, 22 people had warrants that HPD saw on their screens required by law to call ICE, just like they'd be required to call Montgomery County or Travis County or any jurisdiction. Of the 22 that had a warrant, ICE wanted only 2. Some would argue 2 too many. I understand that position. One was a very violent individual. The other had been deported 4 times. Folks, we enforce city and state laws. We had a working system until about 3 months ago with a special election. Then it became a high-profile issue, and I respect everyone's right to bring their position around this horseshoe. But I'm going to close because we need to go to work and let everyone can hear my voice. We have no alternative for Houston to survive, prepare for FIFA, patrol these neighborhoods, deal with sound ordinances, Emancipation, Alameda, Washington, Durham, across this great city. We are doing a good job, but we've got to have today a restoration of the $114 million, and then get ready for the next session. Not only for resources and money, but we need to get ready to defend the rights of all of our residents. Because I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Austin is listening. Austin is watching. So let's all work together, respect each other. I don't know why the discussion has to get so personal. It's not in my world. We get more to get done together than we do individually. With that said, I would like to bring the item, number 11, out of order.
Castex Tatum move to pull item 11 for the first agenda item.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say yes. Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Councilman Kamin?
No, thank you, Mayor. Usually during your mayor's report, we have an opportunity to speak ahead of an item, so I went into queue because there's other issues related to public safety today as well. So I'd like to address that, and then I'll move on to this item. But I was extremely disturbed to see remarks made by an officer less than 48 hours ago that do not represent the values of HPD or the city of Houston, and I want to thank the unions for putting out a statement, but I was extremely dismayed. My understanding is HPD nor the city issued an official statement. And in terms of timing of all of this, I think we can all condemn unequivocally how disturbing and disgusting and unacceptable those remarks were, but we couldn't issue a statement within 24 hours. Within less than 24 hours, though, we received language on this amendment and are expected to vote on something today that the people have not had time to review, that we have not had time to review. And you talk about collaboration. You talk about how this isn't personal to you, but you also say veiled remarks about blaming one council member or another, when as a body, we overwhelmingly voted in favor of something which was within our legal right to do. You talk about collaboration, but there is also a pattern at the state of not collaborating. This is not the first time that Abbott and Paxton have tried to bully our cities. And you reference certain circumstances, but I'll even go back farther. Harvey, in 2017, the governor refused to provide $50 million of the state's rainy day funding for Houston. None of us were at this horseshoe yet, but city leadership at the time fought hard and won for that money, ensuring that there would not be a temporary property tax hike that we would have had to implement to fill that gap if we didn't get those dollars. The city fought for it and won. And then we fast forward to October of last year, and the governor issues an illegitimate order for cities to remove paint from crosswalks in city rights of ways, or we'd lose funding. We rolled over without even providing an alternative to show the communities that we are fighting for them. And I asked then, if we roll over now to a bully, what will he come for next? And now we have the Abbott Amendment, which is a point-blank repeal of the ordinance we passed last week. And once again, the governor is trying to bully our city into submission, withholding public safety funding that he did. He did that, not us. What we passed was within the bounds of SB 4, was within the bounds of contractual agreements, and upholds the Constitution of the United States. And instead of questioning the grounds for it, we're getting misleading information, we're getting threats about overtime being cut. We have a layout that you provided us of other state funding. Parks, water, rail crossings. Are you saying that those are at issue now? Because we have asked over and over again, we received a list of the general grants that were on the list to be withheld. That included, my understanding, from the limited information that we have, is for about $114 million. $100 million of that is federal grants that provide an avenue of recourse in challenging that. They're local, they're state pass-throughs. Out of that 100, 65 million are for FIFA. The remaining 10 to 14 include things like equipment and fleet vehicles, but we have asked over and over again for the contractual parameters of those grants, and we get no specific information on what grants would lead to overtime cuts. We've already spent $50 million over our budget in public safety overtime this fiscal year, but overtime wasn't cut then. We have an over $120 million budget deficit, and yet we're not even talking about our fiduciary duty to defend the city in court. We have a fiduciary duty to defend the city in court. So there's a lot of scare tactics happening, and there's not enough facts being presented. We were given something less than a day before council is supposed to vote on something, in the middle of public session when the public did not get to review or comment on it either. I believe that there is a tag order, a no tag order. Is that correct, Mayor? Yes, ma'am. City Attorney, can you please explain why there is a no tag order on this item?
Because the governor gave until today only for the possibility of resuming funding if the ordinance were amended. And so if that deadline comes and goes, it will be rendered moot, which is the language of the tag rule.
So I'm open to, I'm going to be issuing a tag, and we can have a debate on that. I'm happy to release that tag at the moment for further discussion, and I defer to the chair as to how we would like to proceed on that.
You can offer it up if you'd like, and I'll be glad to rule.
I will be offering up a tag.
Are you going to, or you're doing it?
I'm doing a tag.
Okay. I rule it out of order.
Pursuant to Robert's Rules of Order, Section 24, I move to appeal the decision of the chair, and I need a second.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to rule to, beg your pardon?
Requires a two-thirds vote.
I'm sure. Your votes? Who's seconds?
Councilor Salinas.
And I would like
Table it?
discussion.
Table it? You want to table it or just straight up?
And she'd like discussion on her motion.
You recognize Councilman Kamin.
Thank you. The reason why this item is not taggable, is being presented as not taggable is because it would be rendered moot. However, City Attorney, is this item an ordinance that is before us? Is compared to a grant with an official deadline on it?
This is an ordinance.
And does the ordinance language itself impose any deadlines, or could it be done at any time?
The ordinance does not impose deadlines.
So we are self-imposing a deadline. This is about ordinance language. It is not a contractual grant where if we pass it, we can't then apply for it. What we have is a self-imposed deadline to appease the governor based on a letter. The governor has moved the deadline and moved the deadline and moved the deadline, but regardless of whether that deadline that the governor seeks to impose stands, this is about the language before us specifically. And because it is about the language before us specifically, we are permitted to tag this item. There's nothing in the language of this ordinance that would render it moot if we voted on it next week. Yeah, the motion's before us.
Speak on this item.
I don't need to speak on the tag, but I'd like to speak after the vote on the tag.
Now or later?
After.
Call a question?
Okay, all in favor of overruling the chair on whether this is taggable? I've ruled that it's not taggable. Councilmember Kamin has moved to challenge the chair. Clerk call, secretary call.
There's a request for a roll call.
Yeah, Councilmember Pollard would like a roll call vote. So you need to vote no on the motion to overrule.
Correct.
Mayor Whitmire,
No.
Councilmember Peck,
No.
Councilmember Jackson. Yes. Councilmember Kamin,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans Shabazz,
No.
Councilmember Fillinger. No. Councilmember Thomas,
No.
Councilmember Huffman,
No.
Councilmember Castillo,
No.
Councilmember Martinez,
No.
Councilmember Pollard. Yes. Councilmember Castex Tatum,
No.
Councilmember Ramirez,
No.
Councilmember Davis. No. Councilmember Carter. No. Councilmember Salinas,
Yes.
Councilmember Alcorn.
No.
13-4, it fails. Sorry, 4 to 13, it fails.
There being 4 yeses and 13 noes, the motion fails.
Thank you, Mayor. You made a number of statements about me and the facts of the situation that are incorrect. I've corrected some of those statements publicly before. I won't belabor the point here, but I do think there's 2 things are important to correct. The first is, in my discussion with you, I always frame that discussion on a challenge to any unlawful overreach by the state. And if we had reached that point and the court ruled against us, then I agree with you, we'd be in a very different situation. It is unfortunate that you are unwilling to take this fight to court, but that is the situation we're in. The second statement you made is that Austin has already agreed to adopt this language. I have spoken to 2 people in the Austin City Administration, and that is not what they are telling me. They said no decisions have been made, so that is inaccurate to say that Austin has already adopted the language that you are proposing. But rather than to get into a back and forth or discuss our credentials or history of commitment to the issue, I think it's important that we discuss what we're actually going to vote on. And I have yet to hear you describe what your proposed amendment, or excuse me, Abbott's proposed amendment actually does. So I would like to take this opportunity for either you or the city attorney to answer some very basic questions about what your proposed ordinance does. Whatever your preference is, Mayor, but my first question is, does the proposed ordinance allow HPD to detain people solely on the basis of a civil administrative warrant?
Well, first of all, we're not in court, and you're not going to be allowed to depose me today. We can talk about the amendment in front of us that reinforces the 4th Amendment and protects the city funding. And quite frankly, that's the fundamental question here. I respect you, but that's my position.
Okay, so since you're unwilling to answer the question, city attorney, does the proposed ordinance allow HPD to hold people solely on the basis of a civil administrative warrant?
Point of order. The city attorney, under city rules, has a duty to respond to the mayor and to city council on legal questions of matter.
Maybe he's thinking.
That, I want to make sure that that is laid out.
I have to be recognized by the mayor. I don't have the ability, like council
Carol,
members, to
you
just...
can give your understanding of the agreed language.
The amendment requires compliance with the 4th Amendment. The 4th Amendment requires that a state law enforcement official detain a person only for so long as needed for purposes of a state law violation, inquiry, and any processing of a citation or arrest.
That does not answer my question. It's very simple, yes or no. Is the intent of this ordinance to permit HPD to hold somebody solely on the basis of a civil administrative warrant?
No.
So under this ordinance, HPD is not permitted to extend the stop solely for the purposes of a civil administrative warrant.
That is correct.
So what does this change do, if not that?
It more precisely defines administrative warrants to recognize that some warrants, it may not be many, have underlying criminal orders or warrants. It also amends the language in terms of what's in the report to prohibit the release of information that is confidential under law. It deletes the word only, which is not really necessary. The sentence without it, stands alone, and adds language that has been recognized by the Fifth Circuit in interpreting SB 4, that it does not materially prohibit or limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities.
So by what you have just represented, HPD cannot reinstate the 30-minute policy following the passage of this ordinance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How does HPD intend to change the adoption of the original ordinance following this policy?
For purposes of HPD, it's probably going to be quite similar. Now, a sergeant may have a conversation with ICE in terms of, is there an underlying criminal warrant or not, but otherwise it should be more or less the same.
I don't mean to belabor the point, but when you say more or less, I think we all deserve to understand what change, if any, do you understand to be made under this new language?
Well, it's what I just recited a moment ago.
But in terms of actual policy, what officers will be doing on the ground, what do you understand to be a change, if any, following the adoption of this new ordinance?
I'm not aware of any change.
Okay, so the ordinance we are voting on will have absolutely no change
Oh, that's
on
not true.
HPD policy following the passage of the prior ordinance.
No,
It does away with the 30 minutes and makes it now a reasonable consideration. And I thought the gentleman yesterday, the law enforcement officer, did an excellent job of what an officer on the street, and in this instance, a supervisor, has to look at the totality, the information that the warrant describes. And, we had a 30-minute rule that was working real well, and y'all did a Prop A against it.
That you voted for.
So I understood. Yes, I did. And it's very understandable why I did. It was so much better than the first. How's that? Legislative process. And so now, this is the agreement that complies with Senate Bill 4 and the funding mechanism.
Mayor, and I just want us to be clear. So the city attorney is saying this ordinance has no effective change on how
Except
HPD.
it realized an agreement with the state of Texas. Maybe that's where our persuasion in the compromise language with the state, that we all agree that this reinforces the Fourth Amendment and protects our funding.
But do you believe that agreement will actually change the policy on the ground from the original ordinance?
That is what HPD, the chief, I think all of us have input in that ultimate policy, and I would welcome you to the table.
The city attorney just said it does not change the policy on the ground. So
that's
again,
his
we need to understand what we're voting on, Mayor. Does it change the policy on the ground, or does it not?
It allows the supervisor and the 23-year-old patrol officer to consider the totality and remove the 30 minutes. So I'm not going to debate you. I'm not your client. You're not my opposing counsel. So it's very self-explanatory.
Perhaps I'm not as sophisticated as you, Mayor. I don't think it's self-explanatory. My reading of the ordinance was we were, in fact, permitting HPD officers to hold people on the basis of civil administrative warrants. I was very happy to hear the city attorney just say that is not the case. We are not permitting HPD to hold people solely on the basis of a civil administrative
It's the
warrant.
totality.
No, Mayor, that's different than what the city attorney just
Well,
said. So we need to understand, is what the city attorney just said what we're voting on? And if it's not, if it's the totality, are you saying, Mayor, that HPD can hold someone solely on the basis of a civil administrative
That's
warrant?
not what I said, and you're doing great lawyering, but it's not going to continue much longer because you're opposed to it. I think this is the ultimate compromise, and it's very self-explanatory. First of all, you have to want to understand it. That's a huge step forward. And I just respectfully disagree, and for the reasons that I mentioned earlier this morning.
Mr. City Attorney, are you changing your answer now based on what the mayor said? Or does your answer remain the same, that HPD cannot hold someone solely on the basis of a civil administrative warrant?
It's the same. I believe it's consistent with what the mayor said.
Okay, so just to confirm, we are all voting on an ordinance that does not change the original ordinance that says you cannot hold someone solely on the basis of a civil administrative warrant. Is my understanding incorrect, Mr. City Attorney?
That's not our interpretation.
So what
The
is your
language
interpretation,
speaks-
Mayor?
I just gave it to you. That is the totality. What you learn from hear from the source, whether it's Montgomery County or Travis County or ICE. That's the reason the law requires you to contact them. Then they're going to start telling you that there may be a warrant out of Honduras. You look at the totality. You look at the public safety concern of the officer and the public. So it's very clear that this is the language that we can all agree to, certainly as it relates to Austin and the Houston Police Department.
I honestly have I don't know where you two stand, because the city attorney keeps saying
I understand.
that we are limited. So if the city attorney's understanding is correct,
We're consistent. We're consistent. Thank you. Councilmember Pollard, would you like to be recognized?
no, I'm not done. The second thing I want to note is, as we sit here in this meeting, we still do not have copies of all the grants and all the certifications that we allegedly signed. But what we did learn from your administration last night is at least 2 of the grants that had previously been alleged to be at issue are not in fact at issue because they predated a certification we signed in 2026. And so as we vote today, we still don't have all the information. And consistent with what the city attorney just said, I have put forth an amendment that each of you have copies of that clarifies that administrative warrants are in fact civil, as the city attorney just said. They are means by which ICE can conduct arrest, and adding the word only back in to ensure that officers are limited to the Fourth Amendment. Again, this is entirely consistent with what the city attorney just said and what the city attorney has repeatedly said publicly, including that HPD must release individuals once the reason for the traffic stop has been addressed. He has said publicly to the press that officers should be prohibited from detaining people solely due to civil administrative warrants, and that the Fourth Amendment prohibition required that approach. So these amendments are simply intended to codify what the city attorney just said, and I would ask that the body vote on it. Yes?
Councilmember Pollard?
Thank you, Mayor. And good morning to everybody. Mayor, you in your mayor's report, you spoke about having great partnerships with the state, and your long experience in Austin. And those partnerships were so strong that right after you voted for the ordinance, the Attorney General sued us. And I'm not sure what partnership looks like in your world, but my partners don't sue me. This whole thing has been about control. As the city attorney just mentioned, the language that is before you doesn't make really any true substantive changes to what we've already voted on. The intent of what we already passed is still the intent of this particular change. The only difference is, instead of us crafting the language, the governor crafted the language, which I think is a slap in the face to all of us as local elected officials for Houston, that it has gotten so petty that the state wants to ensure that it puts its thumbprint on the things that we do by saying, no, if you're going to do anything, it's going to be the language I put forward, even if it really doesn't make any substantive changes to what we've already put forward. The mayor speaks about how he warned us about what could happen, but then he votes for it. Not only does he vote for it, he says it's the right thing to do, which I agree with him. The issue is leadership requires clear communication and direction. And on this topic, we've had poor leadership in understanding the view of this administration. On April 8th, 2026, when we passed this, the mayor said, this is a ratification of the good policies that HPD is conducting. A week later, April 14th, he says, there's only one opinion that matters, and that's the governor's. On the same day, April 14th, in the morning, as reported by the Houston Public Media, the mayor says it's the right thing to do. Later that afternoon, as reported by the Texas Tribune, he says we have to correct that policy. In the same interview, when asked about the suit by the Attorney General, April 17th, as reported by KHOU 11, the mayor says, we've got a city attorney that will address that. In the same exact interview, he states, we will lose at court. It's a diversion, it's a delay. On April 8th, we passed an ordinance, 12-5. When questioned on April 17th about why he decided to vote for it, as reported by KHOU 11, the mayor says, I thought it would be effective. The governor disagreed. Later he says, I thought it complied with state law, but the governor and his legal staff disagree. So at the moment when we passed it, Mayor, you thought this was the right thing to do, as did I. And many of us who did vote in favor of this ordinance did so based on the vetting of our city attorney. The only way that it could get to this body was by our city attorney deeming it lawful and not in violation of state law or federal law. So there was nothing that we put forward that changed that. Now we have language before us that makes some minor tweaks, but the city attorney just said it doesn't really substantially change anything that we've already brought forward. So why are we here in the first place? Because we have poor leadership with poor communication that does not know how to effectively speak out in favor of his own position when the governor or the attorney general from Austin speaks out against it. And so I apologize to the public that you even have to go through this roller coaster ride of emotion on a real issue that affects real people and real communities based on the ineffectiveness of the mayor's ability to communicate properly. Now, I'm glad that Council Member Salinas was able to ask very important questions over the intent and practicality of this change in language, because we all need to understand what we're voting on. And even based on the proposed language by the mayor's office that was crafted by the governor, it doesn't really change much. And because of that, I'm glad that she also brought forth amendment just to make some clarifications to some very minute details as well, so that we're all on the same page. HPD officers have a clear expectation, and the public understands that, one, they cannot be held for a 30-minute policy. They have to be let go after the purpose of the stop is complete, and that we really emphasize that this is for administrative warrants or for criminal, for non-criminal offenses, and that if there is any investigation, it must be for a legitimate criminal law enforcement purpose, and that needs to be emphasized as well. And so that language is before you all for your consideration. And again, I'm sorry to the public that you've all had to witness a 2-week circus based on language that has not done anything but kept the original intent of what we previously provided, which already complied with state and federal law. Thank you.
Councilman Huffman.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, it took a long time to get this amended language because it had to be refined. It had to be thoughtful, and it had to satisfy the governor. So we can guarantee that this funding comes to Houston. Changing the proposed amended language now is playing with fire. We need this funding. We need these partnerships. The city of Houston, we can't do everything alone, right? We need the county. We need the state. We need all the help we can get. And I would urge you all to vote against the amendment to the proposed amendment.
Before us, members, is the Salinas amendment. Councilman Kamin.
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilmember Huffman, I appreciate your comments, and I think that goes back to council has not been afforded the appropriate and necessary time to vote on what's before us. As it pertains to the attempt for clarifying language, which I'm grateful for. For me, the Abbott amendment is put forward, includes language that says, as long as reasonably necessary, officers may temporarily detain an individual as long as reasonably necessary to complete the legitimate purpose of the initial stop. That was what was in our ordinance previously. And for other legitimate purposes discovered during the detention. And the definition of what a legitimate purpose is what concerns me. There are legitimate purposes defined under law, criminal warrants, administrative holds. Those things were in the original item. But the language of what legitimate purpose is so vague. Is the legitimate purpose defined through mayor's policy and what HPD does without council oversight? We don't know, and that's not to say that there aren't good intentions, but we also previously had a policy which started all of this that said there was a stopwatch of 30 minutes on when constitutional protections went into effect. So as the language is, it is so vague, there is far too much room for misinterpretation of what I hope would be a good faith intention, but does not define what legitimate purpose is. And we do not have that clarity as it stands. So I appreciate Councilmember Salinas' amendment because, again, as the language stands, there is language in here that is far too vague and does not clearly define the scope and role of what HPD's duties are in terms of enforcing the law and upholding the constitutional protections of every single Houstonian.
Councilmember Flickens here.
Thank you, Mayor. Myself and the other members here who are on the more conservative side are certainly in the minority in this council. There's often items that come up that we strongly oppose, yet the majority strongly supports. And we've had discussions on a number of those items between us. And most of the time, we kind of end up with the idea that we don't have the votes, we're not going to convince the other side, and it's not in our long-term interest to raise a ruckus and get everybody upset. The city's position is very similar to that at the state. We are in a minority at the state. The mayor, having spent decades dealing with the state, offered very similar counsel in different words when he would talk about their watching. Yet we still went forward into this box canyon. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about this $110 million. The $110 million is an ante. This administration has been able to get $500 million between the state and the federal government. What happens next session when we try to get that money again? We are just shooting ourselves in the foot. And obviously, there's been negotiations. The governor is happy with this language. I know you don't like it. I trust me, I know you don't like it because I don't like it when we're on the short end of the stick. Yet that is the position we're in. I strongly urge everybody to get out of this and to move forward.
Councilman Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to speak on Councilmember Salinas' amendment to item number 11. I'm opposed to Councilmember Salinas' amendment because I think it goes beyond what the Fourth Amendment requires. Under the Fourth Amendment, people must be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. It doesn't say criminal searches and seizures or unreasonable criminal searches and seizures. And that leaves open the possibility that there are other reasonable justifications for detaining someone. And, you know, I've said before, I'm not a fan of using local police resources to try to fix national immigration problems. However, it doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment when an undocumented immigrant is detained pursuant to a final order of deportation by an immigration judge. And I have no reason to doubt that if a judge were presented with a situation where an immigrant was detained for 30 minutes for ICE to get there and execute a warrant based on a final order of deportation, that a judge would find that reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. So I'm opposed to this amendment. I think it goes too far, and it goes beyond what is required by the Fourth Amendment.
Councilman Salinas.
Respectfully, Councilmember Ramirez, in U.S. v. Rodriguez, which we both know was the case that was the basis for the original language in the ordinance that we adopted, in the majority opinion, the court frames its discussion around reasonable suspicion of criminal conduct. It does not frame it as reasonable suspicion of civil violation. And I think we can all agree that an administrative warrant is civil. The DHS website repeatedly acknowledges it. The administrative warrant forms that we all are aware of repeatedly acknowledge it. These forms are signed by an ICE official. There is no signature line for an immigration judge. It is certainly possible that some administrative warrants have the backing of an order of removal from an immigration judge, but there is no guarantee that all of the administrative warrants that HPD will be expected to enforce have the backing of an immigration judge's order of removal. But going to the specific language that we've proposed in the amendment, the original ordinance said very clearly that a civil administrative warrant was not in and of itself a basis to extend a stop. 12 of us voted for that. The city attorney just confirmed that that will remain the law. I don't understand where we are striking that language out of the ordinance, but to Councilmember Flickinger's point, I'm not here to argue about things I don't like. There's a lot of things in this proposal that I disagree with. But I have chosen to selectively propose limited amendments to, in the bare minimum, ensure we are not taking Houstonians' Fourth Amendment rights at issue or putting them at jeopardy. Like I said, I was very relieved to hear what the city attorney said. We're adding 5 words to the governor's language. We are clarifying that the Fourth Amendment is a limiter. It is not a suggestion of what more can be done. We are clarifying, as the Supreme Court has said when looking at reasonable suspicion of criminal conduct. HPD, there is no law that says HPD is empowered to arrest people on the basis of a civil administrative warrant. ICE can. There's no dispute that ICE can. But there is no law and certainly no case that has definitively held HPD is now empowered to assert administrative warrants. And a lot of folks want to talk about SB 4. At the time SB 4 was passed, there were no administrative warrants in the system. No Texas Republican was contemplating that SB 4 would be used to enforce administrative warrants. Now the Trump and the Abbott administration want to change that, change the definition. But that is not what they passed. That is not what we agreed to follow. And again, there's a lot of other things I would want to change in this proposed amendment. But these changes, honest to God, colleagues, is really just intended to ensure that we comply with what our city attorney just said. Our city attorney just affirmed language that was struck out. Fine. These 5 words will ensure we continue to follow that intent to ensure that the city is protected. I assume the reason the city attorney is saying that because he doesn't want us to get sued. We have to honor that. We can't have a vague totality. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that allows HPD to consider or not. But the city attorney has spoken. We cannot hold people solely on the basis of a civil administrative warrant. These 5 words just confirm that. And I would ask that we move to vote on the amendment.
You want to cut off the other colleagues from speaking?
Unless others would like to discuss.
Okay, that's fine.
Call the question.
I think Marta took a rest.
Councilmember Davis is in the queue. Calling the question.
Salinas, call.
If others would like to speak, I don't want to stop them.
Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Mayor and colleagues. In all due respect to the attorneys around the horseshoe, which I am obviously not, and a lot of legal discussion that we've had over several weeks of this matter. So now we're amending the amendment. My deepest concern about this, and again, all due respect to Councilman Salinas and to Councilman Pollard and Councilman Kamin, the fact is that we're going back to the issue about public safety. Now, it's interesting to me that it took us 2 years. If the police, if HPD's process of handling public safety in the manner in which it was, and there were no one around this horseshoe that presented a proposal for 2 years, and now we are less than 2 months away from FIFA. Everybody's talking about the language that's in the amendment, SB 4, the rights of people according to the Constitution, their Fourth Amendment rights, which I all agree. But I think that the general public expects for us to do several things. One is to protect them, the public safety of all Houstonians, no matter who they are. we also have a responsibility to ensure that this city move forward. Now, last year during our budget discussion, there were several colleagues around this issue questioned the cuts that we were getting from the federal government. I heard them ask every department head that come before this council about the concern of cuts that were coming from the federal government. We even have people on this council who literally went to the federal government in order to give us dollars. The mayor has taken a position to work with the state to get dollars, as Councilmember Flicker just said. So where are we? What my concern? What are we trying to do? What are we doing? What are we talking about? We either further the prosperity of our city, and personally, whether people agree with me or not, which is, I done got too old to be bothered about that, to be honest. And I believe in service. That's why I, for one, I don't brag about it, but I gave service to this country in order for us to do things in decency and order, even which is according to the biblical principles. So what are we doing? Are we really taking the city as a whole into, we hear all of this going on and on and on, and I think it's just time for us to put this aside and let's vote on what is before us and let's move forward as a city. We hear a lot of division in this chamber. Disrespect, and then when you question the fact of disrespect, then you get disrespected. So I just think it's time for us to put it at rest. Let's move on.
Thank you. And one issue hadn't been brought up is the emergency center. You mentioned FIFA, but I'm equally concerned, or my highest priority is Houstonians' safety. And we are entering the hurricane season, and the emergency center definitely depends on state resources. Not to mention, we're in constant touch with the state emergency center. So, you know, the sad news is this is not a political issue. And you don't have to like Abbott or Paxton or any of the other players, but the amendment would definitely take monies away and destroy any opportunity for recovery of the funds that have already been taken away. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, and I find myself, you know, a bit upset about the process that has gone before us. I want to make some clarifying statements as well. You know, Councilor Salinas says nothing's happening, but now adding an amendment to what's happening, to the nothing that is happening, I'm confused. What is really happening at this moment? Since October of last year, the conversations of a general order, you know, directives changing have been my conversation, my pathway with the administration. And I had several conversations with Councilor Salinas as she came in, and I explained to her why. Several conversations that I was a part of, that the mayor was a part of, are true, right? Let's work through this process. Prop A was, that's it, that's what I want to do. Something that I thought would ultimately cause some issues to the city of Houston, and now we're here. In that initial Prop A, I actually advised, I said, hey, put in a reversal clause. And her response was, no, but if it happens, we will deal with it at that point. Never was, we're going to take the legal route. And so it's disappointing to continue to create this circus, as Councilor Pollard mentioned, but it's not one-sided. And we understand where we are now here at the city of Houston. We understand that there is a need for partnership, leveraging resources. With the tax rate that we have, we see the challenges that we've been seeing in the city of Houston for over 12 years already. And so is the point now to put your thumbprint back on the negotiations that the mayor and the governor's office had? Then I'm disappointed, because we're not thinking about the entire community. And I think we need to move forward on the initial amendment, and go ahead and start either a vote up and down on the amendment to the amendment.
Pollard.
Thank you, Mayor. I do feel like it's important for my colleagues, all of us here, to actually walk through what the amendment brought forth by Council Member Salinas actually puts forth in the language. As she mentioned, there's only like 5 words that is being added, and I think they're all clarifying words. And I think it's important for us to at least look at that, and then you all can agree or disagree, if you may. But when you look at the definitions of the ICE administrative warrant, all we're adding in is the word civil in front of administrative. So it's a civil administrative warrant, which is a fact. There shouldn't be any issue with adding that. And that the arrest of an individual is by an ICE officer, which is also a fact. There should be no disagreement with those 2 changes. And so to add those in are just clarifying what is a fact that needs to be stated within our ordinance. So taking those out, I don't see the purpose in that or what it's trying to convey, but I do think it's necessary for them to be in. When you look at the second provision, that is provision C, that speaks of the actions of an officer during an encounter, the Abbott Amendment strikes out the word only for it to read, officers may temporarily detain an individual as long as reasonably necessary. The word only is important to be in there. Only is reasonably necessary. To clarify that that is the only way in which you can do it. Only reasonably necessary. There should not be an issue with that. And the initial stop or investigation for other legitimate purposes. If you don't clarify what those legitimate purposes is, it becomes kind of vague and ambiguous. And our officers are left in a gray space. And so we're just adding in other legitimate criminal law enforcement purposes. That's it. All of those are facts that can't really be disputed. And we believe that that clarifying language is important to be there. So this isn't a total redo of the Abbott Amendment. This isn't a, an attempt to change everything, because it was already stated previously by the city attorney that the Abbott Amendment does not change much about the Proposition A that already passed this chamber. But these clarifying words are important as factual that should be included in the language of our formal ordinance. And that's why I'm asking you all to support the amendment to the Abbott Amendment. Thank you.
Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you. Now, we talk about changing that language from, to limit it to criminal law enforcement purposes instead of other legitimate purposes. But there are other situations out there where, situations will arise. So take, for example, girl says she is going to commit suicide. She takes off in her car. Parents call the police, give, her license plate. That license plate's entered into TCIC, NCIC. She's pulled over, and a civil mental health warrant needs to be in place to detain her. That is another example of not a criminal purpose, but other legitimate purposes. So there are other situations out here, and because this ordinance originally, I didn't vote for it originally, but now it's here. And so if it is here and we're not going to repeal it, then we have to amend it. And so there are other situations out there, but we didn't contemplate any of that because it never went to a committee. This would have been a perfect ordinance to go in front of a committee so we could work these things out, but it never went to a committee. So now we need to do the right thing. We need to amend it. And I have one question for the county attorney. If we pass the proposed amended language, as it was proposed, is there anything preventing council, like any other ordinance, is there anything preventing council from later amending this ordinance in the future?
No.
Thank you.
Oh, Castic Tatum, sorry. Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Attorney Michelle, I think it would be helpful if you could give some insight into the negotiations to get us to the amendment that the mayor has presented to the council. That amendment was crafted through the administration and this team at the governor's office. There was back and forth on each side. There was give and take to get to this amendment. Can you give some insight onto how we got to the amendment that the mayor has presented to council?
It was the mayor's staff that was negotiating with the public safety office of the governor. There was back and forth. One example is, the word only, and here I take issue with some of the lawyers on here, but only is, from a grammar perspective, it's superfluous in here. It means the same without it. And the governor's office took issue with that. They thought it could mean more. By taking it out, it should permit funding to be resumed. So I think that's an important distinction.
So this weekend, there was back and forth, there was conversations, and then are you stating that the amendment that we have that was presented by Mayor Whitmire, if this body passes that amendment, the city of Houston will retain its funding, and we can continue to ask HPD for the updates on what's happening and making sure that we are following their protocol and being intentional about protecting Houstonians. But if we vote for the amendment, the governor's office has also agreed to release the funding that has already been frozen.
That's what it has represented, yes.
Thank you.
Council Member Evan Shabazz.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm genuinely happy that we have gotten to a point that this original ordinance that we passed protected people, and the amendment still protects people. There's no timeline, and even though I was threatened that I bet not support HPD, I do trust that they will implement this policy fairly and legitimately. And so I believe Councilmember Salinas called for the question. I don't know where we are with that, but I would really like to put this to rest, because what I don't want to do is put us in a position where we have to continue to go back and forth with the governor for language that he has approved that essentially has done no material change to what we originally passed. So I don't know if I need to call for the question again, but I would really like to put this to rest so that we can move forward with the other city business. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is she calling the question? So is she calling the question?
We still have people in the queue.
Yep. Thank you for your leadership. Member Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions on the written amendment we have received are for the city attorney. So earlier at the top of the meeting, you stated the 30-minute rule would not revert with the passage of the original amendment that we're considering today. Is there anything in this that is necessary for that provision to hold in the written amendment that is before us?
The original Prop A is inconsistent with a 30-minute requirement, and this doesn't affect that.
And then you also said civil administrative warrants would not be a reason for HPD to hold somebody. Again, with this written amendment before us, is this language necessary for that to hold true?
I think the amendment proposed by the mayor covers that without the necessity of this amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to respond to Councilmember Salinas' earlier comments, there is another Supreme Court case, it's U.S. versus Abel, that allows a federal agent to use an administrative warrant to arrest an undocumented immigrant. And then there's a federal statute, which is 8 U.S. Code Section 1357, that allows local officers to cooperate with federal authorities in the identification, apprehension, detention, or removal of aliens not lawfully present. So that is speaking to your amendment requiring or inserting the language criminal law enforcement. Again, I'm not a fan of local police being involved in immigration enforcement, but this is an example of perhaps another legitimate purpose as put forth in the administration's amendment in item 11.
Thank you. Councilman Pollard.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification from the city attorney. When speaking of the word only, you used the word superfluous. Were you using that word to mention or to convey that regardless of if the word only is in there or not, it's not going to materially change or affect that provision?
Yes, I think the sentence, removing only, the sentence remains the same. I don't think it affects it.
Thank you.
Councilman Carter.
Thank you, Mayor, and I agree. I'm hopeful that we can vote on this. And Councilmember Salinas, in the future, I would like to offer you a ride along with HPD, spend a couple of days on the ground with them and really see when they have to use discretion and how you may further be able to learn how that really works. And I'm sure you've spent much time on the streets with them riding, and you know, their jobs are pretty heavy lift. I hope that with the, you know, getting in agreement with the governor and the mayor's language, what they've come up with, that we can move forward, and perhaps the reference numbers that HPD has had actual ICE intervention can go down to zero from that 74 or the 33. But, you know, I think their job is a heavy lift, and we have to support them. And I think that certainly to keep rehashing the language and also risk the working relationship with the state or the federal government is not only putting HPD at risk, but also putting our community. Thank you.
If I may briefly respond to your comment.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor.
I was in.
Oh.
You next, Jackson. She's already spoken.
Jackson.
Mike. Okay, Mayor, you and I have a long history, and I want to start by saying I respect you. I understand the position the governor has put the city in, trying to strong-arm us into submission by threatening to defund the police, which is ironic. I've heard from many of my constituents on the issue, and they clearly are split. And I hate the fact that we're putting neighbor against neighbor. There are parts of the amendment ordinance that I support, requiring supervisors before contacting immigration adds oversight. But as I'm hearing this discussion, I really appreciate the discussion, that the ordinance that we originally passed is no different from, not much difference from the amended ordinance. I've thought hard about this decision. I've asked myself, what is the right thing to do? Because the truth is, there are many people that I know that are still undocumented. And of course, there's no true pathway to citizenship for a lot of these folks. And so I would love to have those type of discussions, but I know it's a federal issue, but that's something that we should be asking ourselves. Just 2 weeks ago, we passed the ordinance. I supported it. And again, just from discussions that we're having, these ordinances are not much different. And of course, we need the dollars that's from the state. And so my conscience is telling me that I need to support this amendment that the mayor put forward. But of course, we need to address the underlying issue, and that is a pathway to citizenship for a lot of our people that live in our neighborhoods. And so with that, I will support this ordinance.
I appreciate it, and I'll join you in that effort. We ought to be talking to our congressional delegation. Elections matter. There's obviously a congressional campaign being conducted as we talk, and U.S. Senate races, elections matter, so I'll follow and be glad to work with you. Councilman Salinas.
Councilmember Carter, I just want to respond to your question. Actually, before I ran for council, I did in fact do a police ride-along, and I was told I was one of the few candidates they had ever seen do a ride-along. So I have worked very extensively to ensure that I understand the perspective of officers, and throughout this process have been in discussion with HPD officers to understand how they feel about it. And the overwhelming sentiment I have heard is that they want to be empowered to focus on public safety and not waste our limited taxpayer dollars on immigration enforcement. So I appreciate the offer, but please know that I've already done it. You know, I will just say, again, the sentiment that this new ordinance doesn't really do anything. Again, I don't think this is a battle among council. This is a battle between us and the governor. It is so unfortunate that the governor of Texas and the attorney general are wasting all of this time and resources forcing us to have a debate about an ordinance that we all seem to agree doesn't really do anything. There's a lot of, accusations of folks playing politics. I think it is clear the only people doing that are the governor and the attorney general, and it's really unfortunate that we're in this position.
Evan Shabazz.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, in regards to the amendment, I don't think that it's something that can be defined. Legitimate, as long as we know that it is not related to a civil administrative warrant, because so many things happen when police officers stop that. I mean, we can't define what's legitimate. As long as it's considered to be of a criminal element, I believe that we don't have to clearly define that, because we've clearly defined that they are not to move forward in terms of taking people into custody for administrative warrants. So I don't want to beat this to death. I am, again, going to say that I am glad that there have been no substantive changes to the original ordinance. I don't know how many more people are in queue. One, okay, all right. Well, I jumped in because we're going to keep talking. You know me.
Ready to vote.
Thank you.
Well, sorry, I'm confused as to whether or not we're on the motion before us, which Councilmember Salinas presented related to the amendment, or if we're talking about the main item. So
the amendment.
The Salinas amendment.
Okay, great. I want to yield to council members that haven't had an opportunity to speak yet.
You're the last.
Okay, all right.
We're ready to vote.
Okay. The only thing I want to, that's fine, vote.
Okay, members, the vote on the Salinas amendment,
We have a roll call request.
which would, I think, clearly undo our agreement and the funding that we so desperately
Excuse me,
need.
I'm willing to drop, since we've received repeated representations from the city attorney that this ordinance does not substantively
Let's vote.
change the original ordinance.
Secretary,
I'm willing
call
to
the roll,
drop.
please. We're in
I'm
the
willing
process-
to drop the amendment.
We're in the process of taking a vote.
Mayor, I'm dropping the amendment because, I'm dropping it because the city attorney, withdrawing it, because the city attorney has confirmed that there's no substantive change.
Yes, ma'am.
I've been waiting to talk on the main item, so I'm going to talk. I'll start by saying that I hate what's happening across our country and the treatment of undocumented immigrants. I've watched the news accounts. I've read the reports of the deplorable conditions in detention camps. Immigrants come to this country for many reasons. Many are here to escape dangerous conditions in their own home countries. Who is to say any of us would not have done the same thing, made the same sacrifices to protect our loved ones? Many impacted people have lived and worked among us in Houston for decades. Houston is a city of immigrants. I don't want to see anyone disappeared or shipped off without due process. Separating families, causing irreparable financial and emotional hardship, it's all heartbreaking, and I do not support it. It goes against my values and my faith. I did not vote for this heavy hand of ice, and I am confounded that some of our leaders at the federal level see this as a zero-sum game. What we need is comprehensive immigration reform to give people who have been working and contributing here dignity and a clear pathway to citizenship. That means compromise. We need our federal leaders to work in a bipartisan manner to make this happen. These are federal issues, but they have now crept into our city purview. I supported the previous ordinance to protect individuals' Fourth Amendment rights as deemed legal by our own city attorney, and which we are continuing to do. But as the mayor warned when I first broached the subject of HPD and ICE with him, there would be serious implications if we further interfered with HPD policy and general orders. That's now happening, and the fiscal future of our city depends on what we do today. I ran in 2019 in large part to help put the city on a stronger financial footing. The cold, hard fact is that it takes money to run a city, and we don't have enough of it. We have made huge strides in pension reform, OPEB reform, setting more funds aside for deferred maintenance, cutting expenses, now the EY work. I have been very vocal about the need for more revenue to meet the city's needs. I voted against keeping the tax rate the same because it dug us $53 million more into the hole. Now we are looking at a hole of $114 million. As your budget chair, colleagues, the loss of these funds is untenable. I spoke to Melissa Dabowski. This will impact the general fund, other than the $10 million in police cars and the $440,000 that could be debt financed in body armor. The rest of this money directly impacts the general fund, primarily additional overtime for FIFA. You saw hope here yesterday, justifiably, because when we have to go to the general fund for money, we don't cut public safety services, we cut other services. I was here in 2011 when Mayor Parker faced a $75 million deficit, did not have the same kind of reserves we had, and had to lay off 700 employees. And those were parks employees, and those were libraries employees, and those were not public safety employees. So this does have an impact on that. From a budget standpoint, the potential loss of $114 million in public safety funding is not something the city can absorb without significant consequences. These are not peripheral dollars. This funding supports core functions, public safety operations, victim services, emergency response, and critical infrastructure. If this funding is withdrawn, the city faces two options: reduce services or backfill with fund balance. And if we choose to backfill with fund balance, we come within striking distance of our financial policies, our 7.5%. And if we get that close, that affects our credit rating, that affects our ability to borrow. The Attorney General approves our borrowing, too, so that we have all of that to consider. I say all of this just to say we're already managing structural budget deficits. We have a lot to look forward to in the upcoming budget season. But to look at this, I hate that what has seemed like a choice between money and people. It's disgusting. It's horrible. It's not what any of us want to be doing. And I hate being put in this position. But overall, I'm going to support this amendment because what the city attorney has said, or the only amendment that stands, because what the city attorney has said is it is protecting people's Fourth Amendment rights while also protecting our financial future. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your leadership.
Martinez.
Councilman Martinez.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're living through real moments of tension in this country, especially to immigrant families. Fear is high, trust is fragile, and the expectations placed on local governments are heavier than ever. That reality is something we just can't ignore. As council members, similar to my colleague saying, our responsibility is clear: represent the people of Houston, deliver essential city services, and help maintain safe and stable city. The work is already difficult at our current tax rate. Which is why the city often relies on the state and federal dollars to supplement our critical programs. I raised consistent concerns about how Prop A would function in practice. Since October of 2025, when this conversation really started to get heated, I pushed early for revisions to a general order, like other Texas cities, not to weaken the intent, but to ensure it could be implemented and withstand legal scrutiny, but also not to bring unnecessary attention to our city. Unfortunately, those efforts were not fully incorporated, and the process moved forward without fully addressing operational realities. This is how we have arrived at the challenges that we are now confronting. I also proposed a reversal clause, as I mentioned earlier, to ensure that if unintended consequences or legal conflicts emerge, we had a responsible way to course correct. It was not included, but a verbal agreement was made, and it was never pending a legal discussion. I was in those conversations. We now find ourselves not holding true to those words. From the beginning, my focus has been simple: protecting community, building back trust with local law enforcement, and avoiding exposing the city to unnecessary legal and operational risks. This has never been about politics for me. It is about getting policy right, ensuring it works in practice, but quite frankly, do the work of bringing local law enforcement and community together. This is the work done in the community, not in front of cameras. Supporting this amendment to this Prop A does not mean turning our backs on immigrants. It means ensuring Houston can continue to function, deliver services, and keep people safe without putting critical funding at risk. It also reflects the reality that we must comply with state law while still respecting constitutional protections, including the Fourth Amendment. The stakes are significant. Funding that supports core public safety work, internet crimes against children investigations, protection of critical infrastructure, regional preparedness, truancy prevention, safer schools and families, and body-worn cameras that strengthen accountability. Losing that funding would directly weaken services that people rely on every day. That is why this vote is not about the headlines or politics. It's about responsible governance. At the same time, immigrants are Houstonians. I will continue to stand with immigrant families, support efforts that build trust between local law enforcement and the community, and push for policies grounded in fairness, transparency, and dignity. I also expect accountability from HPD and will continue to holding officers to the highest standards in how these policies are carried out. I've listened, engaged, and advocated for strengthening trust between HPD and the community. And I will continue to work with the community partners focused on stability and understanding. We must be honest. Escalation without a viable path forward risks costly litigation and instability for our departments. A measured approach is not weakness. It's responsible governance. The work now is clear: rebuild trust between community and HPD, strengthen transparency, and clarify roles so residents understand what local law enforcement will and will not do. Because when trust breaks down, we all know people stop reporting crimes, victims stop coming forward, and public safety suffers. We can protect safety and stand with immigrant communities at the same time. In fact, we have to, we must. That is the responsibility that I will continue to meet for all Houstonians. And for that, I'm ready to, again, vote on this in support of the amendment.
Thank you. Councilman Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor and colleagues, for the discussion today around a very sensitive subject. You know, what we are seeing across the city, what has happened across the country with ICE is, frankly, it's disgusting. And I know that there are families in District H that have been impacted by it. It has reinforced my commitment to continue to work for my constituents, all constituents, to ensure that they feel safe and don't have the fear and anxiety around local law enforcement that is tasked to keeping them safe. The ordinance that we considered a few weeks ago, I was proud to support it. It reinforced the Fourth Amendment, which is not a radical idea. It's a constitutional right. And it added transparency to something that we frankly talk about quite a bit around the horseshoe. We want to be more transparent. We need more transparency. It brought that. And it brought it to an issue where there is a lot of anxiety and fear across communities. And we see that from people not wanting to testify as a witness. We see that from folks not wanting to report crimes or go to PIP meetings in person. And the amendments we have heard today repeatedly that are being considered don't undermine the ordinance we passed. There's not material change to what we intended to do. Civil administrative warrants won't be used to hold folks. The 30-minute rule does not come back into place. And the work doesn't stop with what passes today. There is still engagement that needs to happen. There are still relationships that need to be built and communities that need to know that they will be protected. And that's all part of the engagement that needs to happen and the work that we have to do. But what is being considered before us today, we have heard time and time again, does not materially change what we intended 2 weeks ago when we passed the original ordinance. I'm going to commit to continue to work with my district on building trust and ensuring that communities are heard, and I will be supporting the amendments before us today.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem Peck.
Thank you, Mayor. I first want to acknowledge everyone who's come to talk about this at public session. I know it's a deeply personal issue for so many people and so many families, but I also want to acknowledge the complexity of this issue, especially when drafting public policy. You can be against the original ordinance, but still recognize that HPD doesn't have the time or resources to do ICE functions. You can be in favor of the original ordinance, but also acknowledge that we live in a city and we have to follow state and federal laws. So there's a lot of gray areas here, a lot of emotions here. And the problem is that everybody thinks they're right. And I get it. I think I'm right too. But maybe what's actually right for Houstonians is that we find a way to move forward and compromise and work together so we can get back to the business of the city. And I think that's what this amendment is really trying to do. People came to us asking for a change because they're scared, but here's the problem. There's nothing that we are going to do here at this table that's going to take that away. HPD confirmed that calls for service have not gone up since this ordinance went into effect. The people who were scared before are still scared today, and there's nothing that we are going to do here to change that. But what we don't want to change are the tools and resources available for HPD to do their jobs to keep our community safe. At the end of the day, we're all sitting here really arguing about federal issues. It's time we get back to the business of the city because we can't say that we are doing all of this for the immigrant community and then not have the same urgency to fix the streets so that they can get to work, or to fix the flooding so their homes don't flood, or to fix the illegal dumping issues that are in their communities, or to improve the neighborhood parks in their areas where they live. Those are the issues that affect their day-to-day lives. They affect the issues of Houstonians' day-to-day lives, of everyone's day-to-day lives. And it's what the people elected us to fix. So let's work together and get back to the business of our city.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, I think that we all can agree that this has been an emotional issue. It's a sensitive topic. And quite frankly, 2 weeks ago, I think Houstonians and everyone saw the heart of our council with that 12-5 vote. I think people saw that when we supported this Prop A measure, it was because we support Houstonians. And Councilmember Elkhorn, I agree with you. I hate that we are doing this. We've listened to hundreds of residents. Many have said, we need to fight this. We've got to hold the line. Council members, hold the line. Be creative. Council members, be creative, stand firm, council members. And quite frankly, we really are sitting in two truths at the same time. And you can have real concerns about the constitutional questions here, and you can also recognize that the city of Houston cannot responsibly put millions of dollars at risk in a fight that we are not positioned, in my opinion, to win right now. I think it took creativity to get to this amendment. And I do want to thank Vice Mayor Pro Tem Peck for the work that she did to initiate a lot of these conversations. It took creativity to hopefully find a balance or that sweet spot where we as a city can feel like we are protecting Houstonians, protecting their Fourth Amendment right, clear expectations for HPD, and not putting our already fragile finances at further risk. Let me be clear. I voted for immigration rights. In 2024, I voted for Vice President Kamala Harris because I believed her when she warned us that Trump's immigration agenda would not stop at the border. She warned us that it would reach into cities. And when she said it would reach into cities, I heard her. Because as a city leader, I knew that the government closest to the people would have to bear the brunt of these decisions. She warned us that his immigration agenda would pull local governments and local law enforcement into federal immigration enforcement and put due process and constitutional protections under real pressure. And we are seeing that play out right now. These concerns are real. The constitutional questions are real. The confusion is real that this creates for local government. So now, unfortunately, we have to govern in this real world. The financial consequences are very clear. While people may not want us to fight in a way, people want us to fight in a way that they feel is bold. In my opinion, what really would have been bold was to elect a president that would not have added 700,000 administrative immigration warrants to the National Law Enforcement Database. We were warned of this before Mayor Whitmire warned us. Unfortunately, I think a legal battle, the only winners will be the attorneys who get paid to sift through everyone's opinion. At this point, our issues are too big for either or. As a city, we cannot dig our heels in. Our problems are too big. Our expenses are too large. And I know for a lot of people, unfortunately, this may feel like surrender, but it's not. This is real stewardship. If this amendment allows us to maintain the funding and not jeopardize future funding, and we can still watch implementation closely, we must insist on clarity for our officers and continue to speak up when our constitutional rights are at risk. I will always stand up for constitutional rights. Again, that's why I voted the way I did in 2024. I will always do what I believe Houstonians want us to do. This is my 9th time going into a budget cycle. I have fought for my residents' projects. I have fought 9 years for Alameda Plaza, and every year that project price tag goes up. We're over $30 million for that one project. Every project is getting more expensive. We cannot afford to lose any of our funding. In this moment, I believe that responsible leadership will require us to protect Houstonians and also protect the financial stability of this city. So, Mayor, I'm ready to call the question in support of the amendment.
Thank you. Well said.
We have a call to question.
Members, we have to call the question. All in favor say yes.
Point of order, there are members in queue that have not spoken on the main item.
Call the people.
Call them. Councilmember Pollard.
Point of order. When a question is called, when there are members in queue, those members are allowed to speak prior to the question being
We're there.
called.
What's the issue?
He called Pollard.
Apologize, I thought you were roll calling. I apologize.
I was just seeing if you were listening. Go ahead, Councilman Pollard.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, it was necessary and purposeful for us to have these discussions. This is a big issue that impacts many people, impacts many communities. We're the 4th largest city in America, the most diverse city in America. 1 out of 4 people in our city are foreign born. So a lot of people are impacted by this. A lot of people are passionate about this. And so it's necessary to have these discussions. We were elected to have these discussions, and they should take some time. They should take some thought. So I just want to ensure that we don't rush through or not appreciate the fact that these are important matters that need to be addressed. Through this, we were able to recognize and see that the Prop A proposal that we brought forth a couple weeks ago that passed 12-5 did not violate state law, did not violate federal law. The conversations today and the statements of the city attorney reinforce that. And so this really comes down to control. Who gets to seem as if they are the one that's putting forth almost the same language? We talk about the 114 million. As much as I disagree with the governor on many things, there is no way on earth I think that he would do anything to punish Texans to that degree. The money is frozen for the moment for this political theater. This is theatrics. This is politics. There's no way that someone who cares about Texans, as much as the governor says he cares about Texans and prioritizes public safety, as much as the governor says he prioritizes public safety, and then takes over $100 million away from efforts that go towards that. I don't want us to be that naive. What the governor wanted to take place has taken place. He was able to put forth his own language that does almost the exact same thing of the language that we put forth a couple weeks ago that you voted on. So when you vote today, regardless if you vote for or against this amendment, you are voting for our Proposition A. And we thank you for your support. I will be voting no because it's principle that we should not have government overreach from the state level. We should have local control over the ordinances and the issues that affect Houstonians. And so I am glad we got clarification from the city attorney today that the Abbott amendment does not materially change anything that we put forth in our original Proposition A, that we will not be going back to some 30-minute policy, that it is established that administrative warrants are civil in nature, and that people can only be detained for a reasonably necessary period of time based on the original purpose of the stop. So I appreciate the discussion. I apologize to the public for all of the time and effort that went through with this circus, but I will be voting no on this Abbott amendment based on principle alone. Thank you very much.
Councilman Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 weeks ago, I voted for the measure so that police could focus on enforcing state law and city ordinance. That's their mission. They could also keep the trust of the community. Since then, we've been threatened with a loss of $114 million. That cannot be ignored. I support item 11 because it will allow the city to keep funding that it desperately needs. We're facing a budget deficit of more than $170 million. To those who have urged us to fight state government in court, I would say the practical realities have to enter in. Having evaluated cases for more than 30 years, there are important questions that have to be asked before you file a lawsuit. Questions like, am I likely to win? How long will it take? What are the unintended consequences? The answers to all these questions are not in our favor. The loss of this funding, as well as the repayment of obligations and the added strain on our already constrained city budget, simply cannot be ignored. Not only are we likely to lose, but will further damage our relationship with state leaders and legislators. A city with the financial issues that we face cannot afford that cost. This vote as well is about good government. It isn't about whether the red team wins or the blue team wins. It's about making sure Houston doesn't lose.
Thank you. Councilmember Kamin.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, over and over again, we're hearing people say this is being used for politics. This is political. For me, it is absolutely not political. This is about, as an attorney, the children that I saw in a detention center under child separation, working to get those children out. I've witnessed firsthand the human cost when due process protections are cast out the window. This is about thousands of children who are too afraid to go to school here in Houston, victims and witnesses that are too afraid to come forward, a wife that was in tears before us yesterday because her husband with no criminal record has been detained for half a year now. A high school senior here in Houston with no criminal record who should be graduating with his friends in a few weeks, but instead was held for 2 months and then deported. The active duty soldier serving for 27 years, including in Afghanistan, who says he does not know why his wife is being detained. And above all else, this is about the constitutional due process rights guaranteed to all persons in the United States and the rule of law. And the law is unequivocal. This body has the right and authority to determine laws and ordinances. Now, why the City Council should or should not take an action is a legitimate debate, and I respect all of my colleagues in these perspectives. But what is not a legitimate debate is the rule of law and our right under the law to act. And any time we as a citizenry give up our responsibility to stand for the rule of law, we sacrifice that which is most precious, which is our democracy. And the valid action we took is rooted in law. The valid action we took was in response to a policy the city put out that raised serious constitutional questions. It not only wasted law enforcement time and resources, but opened the city up to liability for violating the rights of Houstonians. What we passed was narrowly tailored to adhere to state and federal law and safeguard public safety resources, which are already stretched far too thin. The city has a right to address resource allocations, especially when it comes to local law enforcement. And we do not want officers sidelined waiting around on the side of the road. We don't have the time or the resources for that. And we passed an ordinance, which is within our right to do so, to protect the rights of Houstonians and protect local law enforcement resources. The ordinance stated very clearly and appropriately, those constitutional protections are preserved. When the lawful purpose of a stop has ended, it's ended. That is it. If there's a basis under criminal or statutory law to detain someone further, they can still do that. And there was also no prohibition against contacting ICE. The law is clear that police cannot detain someone beyond that because of the Fourth Amendment. And you heard a little bit of that language, but not the full clause. The right of the people to be secure in their persons houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. That's why this was the right thing to do. And we are not debating immigration policy. That is for Congress to decide, and they must fix a broken system that is harming too many people. But what we made certain is that we remain within the bounds of the rules of our Constitution, a Constitution that preserves our freedoms regardless of race, color, creed, national origin, immigration status, or political affiliation. I do not believe that we can allow our city to be bullied. We cannot bend a knee, or this will continue to happen over and over again. and we cannot forsake the Bill of Rights. I do not believe the language before us is clear enough. For me, it is too vague, and we have not had the sufficient time to review it in depth and have the conversations necessary and allow the public the opportunity. Bishop Dixon is in the audience. I asked the NAACP what they would like. They asked for more time. We are not being given that time. And just last week, we heard from leaders who reminded us what can happen when we allow others to chip away at our laws. And I'm quoting now. Democracy is fragile. Hitler and Mussolini rose through legal means and then dismantled the systems that empowered them. Democratic institutions must be protected. They become vulnerable when citizens grow fearful, disengaged, and are eager to blame the other. Freedom, justice, and pluralism demand vigilance. 2, decisions have consequences, and doing nothing is a decision. Each of us has agency. Every choice matters. Speak or stay silent, intervene or walk away, uphold justice or tolerate injustice. Ethical courage is a muscle we strengthen through practice. That unchecked hate leads to violence. What we study in our history books did not begin with murder, but with words, with slurs, stereotypes, and propaganda. In today's world, its outrage spreads faster than truth, and I have seen the social media posts attacking my colleagues with racial slurs. Resisting propaganda and distortion is more urgent than ever. When a group is categorically scapegoated and where denial spreads, truth collapses. These were the lessons of the Holocaust, according to the director of the Holocaust Museum of Houston, that stood before us just last week. And it is not hyperbolic to compare those lessons to what we are witnessing with the systemic efforts to dismantle our constitutional protections and civil liberties. These are the lessons of what happens when we stay silent and we keep our heads down, and we hope we don't rock the boat too much. We are called upon to stand up for the rights of the stranger, the immigrant, the asylum seeker. In every generation, we must insist on our inherent dignity of every person and to cry out when power is wielded with cruelty. Do not wrong or oppress the stranger, for we too were strangers. Other cities are defending the rights of their residents, and the lawful actions that they have taken are exactly in line with what we did. And we must protect the people that we serve. The rights of the people of Houston are not for sale. And I respectfully cannot support attempts to hold our city hostage. I cannot support language that raises, for me, significant questions without timely opportunity for us and for residents to review. My district residents that were before us yesterday have asked me to vote no, and that is what I intend to do.
Councilman Salinas.
I just want to thank all of you again for the time and effort you have put into this issue. It means a great deal to me and to folks in the community. I want to clarify, a lot of folks have said that the council members that brought forth this proposition caused this issue. We did not cause President Trump to put hundreds of thousands of administrative warrants into the system. We did not cause HPD officers to wait for up to 2 hours for ICE to arrive. It was those actions that forced us to act to protect the constitutional rights of Houstonians. I believe constitutional rights should be explicit. All Governor Abbott's amendment does is tell us to make those rights implicit. Rights that the city attorney agrees still apply, but he's asking us to say, just trust me. We're going to keep following those rules, but we just don't need to say them out loud because that's going to upset the governor. I will be voting no on this amendment because I don't think we should play games with Houstonians' constitutional rights. And if we said it explicitly once, by taking it out, we are creating a question as to whether they will continue to apply. But I remain hopeful that the city attorney's assurances will be proven true. And I know the nation will be watching the transparency that we were able to keep from our Proposition A to see if we do in fact comply. But I will be voting no. It's unfortunate that the governor is playing games with the city of Houston and the other cities, but we can never stop standing up to defend Houstonians' constitutional rights. We all took an oath to do so. Thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. I am grateful that we're getting to the point to where it seems as though that we're finally getting to where we agree on what's best for the city of Houston. And certainly I, for one, don't want to see anyone's position to be